another thing to understand are the other influences. There are several creators at work who are all playing a big role. Um, Not least is nominally the artist, Liz Danforth, whose work graces a wide variety of role-playing games and is super goddess. All right, awesome lady. Has a Patreon. Go sign on. If you look at her influence, and are fortunate enough to have a conversation with her about it, you will pick up on the excitement for playing fantasy. And it's a very period fantasy of the time, which is leavened with humor and with whimsy, and a certain rough and ready quality, which is compatible with those two things in the 70s. It doesn't really kind of blend that well, or at least there's an overlap with Ken St. Andre's characteristic kind of snarkiness, wise-ass approach. Other influences are Bear Peters, whose famous Dungeon of the Bear is an early Tunnels and Trolls thing. And also a name familiar to many of us, Mike Stackpole, who's contributed to many, many other games like Champions, and with whom I have also conversed about these things. Ken Bear, as far as I can tell, without really having conversed with them in detail about this, but it's evident in the work. They're all about the slaying, the dungeon, the gore porn, the hilarity of it, as well as perhaps some tactical things, but tactical things in the face of ha, guess you rolled one of those, bye, that kind of thing. Whereas Liz and Mike are much more into, let's enrich in this fantasy, and kooky moments are fine. Self-reference is fine. All that's great. Underground comics after all, but we want this fantastic richness to keep going. And we want protagonists whose decisions actually do things and illuminate or develop, who they are. So you can really look across the different work and you can see these weird, components. So they're just giving you an idea of what you're looking at if you pick up Tunnels and Trolls 5th edition, arguably any of the so-called editions before that, and also the various extraordinarily diverse support materials, which are clearly not being produced through a single vision of how to play or what for. So, okay, all that's there. What is it about TNT that you think makes it the best bona fide dungeon crawling game? Wow, there are so many things to unpack. Feeling like I don't even want to say that. I do not want to evoke a particular former U.S. president by saying, well, it depends on what it means. What is it about Tunnels and Trolls? It depends on what it means. But it kind of does. Is there an it? Or let's take what is it as sort of just an invite. Can you, expound? Which is what I'm going to do. First point. I don't think it's an it. Or that it is in that higher order set of phenomena that can coalesce and take on shapes and be what it is this time for an identifiable condition of chaos, an identifiable state of chaos. That's where the it is, right? So it's not in the book. The book helps us get there in a specific way with lots of its. Okay, so that's, here I am. Pronoun by pronoun, I shall march through this sentence. The best. I'll cop to that. For the thing that we're talking about, yeah, it's the best. Done in 1 or in 5 in 1979. If you're looking for old school dungeon crawl, What the fuck are you playing anything else for? Or rather, get it on here, and then you've got a gold standard for talking about anything else. Bona fide. Well, that's kind of judgmental, isn't it? Right? I mean, is Blue Home bona fide dungeon crawling? No. Sorry, man. So what do I mean by this dungeon crawling thing? Okay, it doesn't have anything to do with being in a fictional dungeon. So dungeon crawling is a non-literal term. Second, it doesn't have anything to do with playing like, Tolkien-y elves and dwarves and stuff like that. Historically, yeah, that kind of goes in there. You take this thing, and I say Tolkien-y, definitely not Tolkien as such. And you basically mine that stuff. You kind of grab it all up, and stuff it in there. That therefore has some kind of old schooly or dungeon crawly thing about it. That one guy's like this and one guy's got a big beard or some shit like that. Okay, clearly that's not an issue. The literature of creeping and crawling in tunnelsy and corridors and dungeony kind of places, Mines of Moria, Zukotal in Robert E. Howard's Red Nails, those amazing passages in the mountain full of manticores in the Worm Ouroboros, and of course, perhaps spookiest of the lot, hard to believe, the Tombs of Atuan in the book of that name by Ursula Le Guin. Just off the cuff. There are others. You can point to a bunch of others, but, fantasy literature is full of some super fucking great dungeons in this term. Technically, mazes, really. But dungeon crawling role-playing doesn't do those either. The roles those things play in some kind of epic or aesthetically what they do, that's not what we're talking about either. We're talking about a thing of its own. We're talking about a early role-playing phenomenon. Course title drop, 3 fantasies, all about this stuff. Good course. So what are the qualities that I do talk about in this regard? Well, I've written about it tons at Adepts Play. One is the crawl, as I call it, which is effectively a press your luck, voluntary retreat circumstance. Now, keeping in mind that no single technique is going to do the job. It's only when they all enter into play and are needed by human hands, needed with dough, and enter into consequence that we now will find or realize or experience what we're talking about. And again, even though we can talk about specific mechanics as having contributed in a highly identifiable way, they didn't make it happen. Not in a, that was in it, so it did this, and oh, look, then we got that. Okay? Just quit thinking about game procedures in that way. It's maddening. So when I talk about the next things I talk about, please keep that in mind. One of them, just one, is that you get 100 experience points by stepping on the relevant level of the dungeon. 100 for first, 200 for second, 300 for third. Yes, that's true. Go down that staircase, tap your toe on that pavement right there. Oh, third level, 300 experience points. Blah, right? Then there's a question about whether you get it going back up again or not. The question is not whether this is an option. The question is whether you get it going down and going up or just going down. Up to you. So, but that's a feature. Now, how is that good? Not in any one-to-one way. Just keep that in mind. Add to it, as has been discussed at Adept Play in detail, the expectation that everybody is playing 2 to 4 characters simultaneously So if you've got 3 people in play, you've got 6 to 12 characters in the group. This is just a given. And it's such a given that they don't even say it. I mean, it's not, you're like, it doesn't say it in there. Read this, and this, and there is no other conclusion. They didn't say it because 2 people playing in the 70s, this was so ordinary that why would you? In fact, I strongly suggest that in the limited play space that any given person had, that the St. Andre group probably just did that and would never conceive otherwise at that time, is my guess. So anyway, keep that in mind too. And that player character death, at the very least, is quite frequent, and that you are expected to fold in new characters at first level. So the characters that are surviving are going up in level, and then characters are coming in per mortality and starting, therefore, at different times. And so you're going to end up with those 6 to 12 characters at any given time being pretty diverse in level, which, since the levels are quite solidly rated, monster level and level are pretty tightly linked. So therefore, that touching your toe down there, now that you've got this diverse level party, becomes very, very interesting. Very different for 10 characters, all 4th level, to go to the 4th level, from what is more likely a diverse party of 1st through 4th level of 10 characters deciding whether to go to the 4th level or not. Do we dare? This, okay, just keep that in mind. Those 2 things kind of do interact. Here are some other aspects of interaction: is the 2 sets of resource: strength for casting spells and constitution as the basis for hit points. These get used up, and their rates of recovery are fairly concrete, fairly solid, and the game is not generous regarding zap, you're healed. Okay, that's not real generous. You are going to be a battered bunch. Everybody probably is going to be a little bit battered. And the distinctions among the classes in terms of rules are very, very strong. You have warrior, wizard, and rogue. You also have warrior, wizard if you roll 12 or above on everything, but that's ass. Never seen one. What's going on with these 3? First of all, warriors, no magic, armor, double value. Whoa. Armor double value is enormous. You can afford to lose twice as bad in that circumstance, because you take damage, which is, you have 2 group rolls. The difference is divided among everybody. So your warrior is going to be basically soaking tons more than everybody else. Then you have the wizard, who can buy spells. You get treasure, and you get out of the dungeon. There's no play in town or nothing. There's a vague reference to a guild, which is just saying this is commerce. And you deduct some gold, and you get that spell, which costs that much. And it's rated, you have to have certain characteristics levels in order to get these higher spells, keeping in mind that levels are defined by increases in characteristics. Okay, that's a big deal. Luck goes up real fast if you want it to, in particular. If you, therefore, look at this warrior and wizard, it seems pretty straightforward. They're really different, and they have different variables that they're interested in. The warrior is interested in treasure insofar as it can get armor and weapons, needs those attributes to go up, because armor and weapons, especially weapons, require specific strength and dexterity ratings. So this is all kind of, further inside the warrior and inside the wizard, it's very clockwork. The variables are really straightforward. What about our rogue? Our rogue is quite interesting in that they do not get the armor benefit. And they can cast spells, but they cannot buy them from the guild. It is mandated that rogues can only buy spells from player character wizards played by other people. So if you're playing a wizard and a rogue, you can't buy spells from your own wizard. Okay? Why not? Fuck you. That's why. And the rate for that spell, how much gold, is up to the wizard player. This is very interesting. Do I sell spells, my hard-earned spells, to the rogue for a gold piece each so that we have more spellcasting, capability? Or, as it happens, do I need some more gold? Dude, you don't have to spend gold on anything, right? I mean, you've got your armor that you like, you got your weapon that you like, and it's going to go up at a nice rate. No issue there. I don't need to help you with that. And you don't really need a whole lot of gold for that than you're already getting. And so all your gold isn't going for anything, unlike Mr. Warrior over there, unlike Mr. Wizard me. Cough it up. Cough a big wad of that stuff. Because if you cough up a big wad of that stuff, I can go off and buy that awesome spell that neither of us have. Notice that this doesn't necessarily have to be a nice interaction. They're going to have different opinions about this. Aha. Differing priorities and strategic incompatibilities, especially of a kind that are highly, highly contingent on the moment, the circumstances that got us here, and who the actual human beings playing are. That is critical to this gestalt of dungeon crawl that I'm talking about. Because, remember, the whole thing is about choosing the turnaround point. Dudes, we've had enough. We're out of here. This time. We've lost enough members, or we're too beaten up, or we're not getting anything out of being in here, this particular part of the dungeon. We're not finding what's in here, son of a bitch. And we're going. That moment. If you have different priorities, different strategies, different improvement criteria, and stuff like that, you're going to have some differences of opinion sometimes that is highly specific to who you are and how we got here and what's crumbing off of each other in the state of chaos. Now we're talking a dungeon crawl. All the variables that I just described are just gorgeous. The gold doesn't give you experience points, but you need it for all those things. It is a separate track of experience is what it is. And so sure, your attributes go up, but if you can't afford, the weapons and armor that, you can benefit from now, right? You got to do both. All sorts of other things. We can talk about the resolution as part of this as well. I talked about how they come together, right? The two opposing roles, and we compare them. But opting in or out of your group's collective role is important because you also have individual resolution roles. They call them saving roles, in which you can do something that changes up the situation, makes a huge difference, right? Like striking the dragon in a vulnerable spot. You're not going to be in the collective role, but you are going to get a saving roll. And if you do, who knows? I mean, maybe it's an amazing vulnerable spot. The thing's going to go down in like a sack of potatoes. All sorts of things. That flexibility of what occurs. And it's surprising coherence in play, by the way, for a single role collective for a whole combat round and sort of unconstructed, no map movement and stuff like that. Surprisingly coherent, as it turns out. As you can see, those contingent decisions, I'm throwing in with the group, I'm doing something individual. The individual thing either just benefits me or it may benefit the group if I'm lucky. All of that plays into all those things. They all point toward each other. And the collision is an unpredictable moment of play. I didn't talk about the diversity of races because they all are radically different in terms of starting points. And some of them are kooky and some of them are very practical and all the rest of it. But if you're playing 2 to 3 characters per person all the way through, then you're not married to that one character for make or break. So therefore, the diversity of the different factors, and all of a sudden this useless fairy who just goes zzz and casts magic really well but doesn't have that much strength and all that kind of stuff turns out to be absolutely critical to success at that point, which was just after the turnaround when we got caught with our pants down. And thank God we had that fairy with us. Wouldn't have been possible if everybody was playing just a single character and the fairy would have eaten dirt, in the very first fight. Seeing what I mean? I hope. Well, I hope. Best, just play. Get it. 5th edition. Get together with people. Big old huge hunking handfuls of 16 dice. Count them up. Okay, we're 12 higher. Okay, divided by the number of characters. Each of you takes this many points. All sorts of things like that. Really fun. All right. That's it. I survived. I hope. Take care.